The 3 couriers arrived before I did. I noticed them from the elevator bank, stationed outside the brand management suite with the deliberate casualness of people who had been told to look like they weren't waiting. They weren't good at it. I had been expecting this for 11 days. I walked past them, set my bag on my desk, and sat down. I checked 2 email threads, flagged one for documentation, and printed a single page from the corporate licensing register. By the time Arabella Thornton's assistant knocked on my door, I had been in the building exactly 6 minutes. "She's ready for you." I folded the printed page, put it in my jacket pocket, and walked to conference room A. The audit records were already on the table. Arabella sat at the head, one hand resting on the stack. "Dante, I've been working through the brand portfolio documentation with our outside advisors. What we're finding isn't consistent with where Legacy needs to be heading." She paused. "To be direct, it's garbage." She said that word at exactly the pitch that carries through a half-open door. One of the couriers shifted. She heard it. She had intended them to. "Which aspects specifically concern the advisors?" I asked. "The overall framework. This isn't about effort, Dante. The company is repositioning, and that requires leadership aligned with where we're going. We'll be making a personnel change effective today." "That makes sense," I said. The composure unsettled her. She had built her case for a contested room and received complete stillness instead. "HR will have severance documentation by end of day. I'll clear my personal files before noon." I stood. She was watching me with the particular attention of someone waiting for a reaction that wasn't arriving. "I want this to be a clean transition. Legacy values what you've contributed here." "I appreciate that," I said. 15 years is a long time." I walked past the couriers at a pace that communicated nothing. Because I had somewhere to be. Back in my office, I did 4 things in this order. I forwarded the current licensing register to my personal server, time-stamped, showing every exclusive trade label attached to every franchise territory Legacy operated under. I cleared my personal files into a bag I had packed 3 days earlier. I called Elias Wren. He picked up on the first ring. "She did it this morning," I said. "Smoothly." She used the word garbage in front of couriers. "Thursday still works for the injunction notice." "Thursday works." "The plant operations team, they're going to feel this before anyone else does." "I know, I'm noting it." "Go clear your desk, I'll call you at 3. What I did not say was that the moment in conference room A had not felt like I expected. I had planned for this day across 18 months of preparation, across 11 years of careful structuring. I had expected it to feel clean. What it felt like was very quiet. The specific silence that arrives when something large that has been in motion finally stops accelerating and simply runs. I was out of the building by 11:43. What Arabella did not know as she sat in her follow-up call was this. The exclusive trade label licenses that Legacy Heritage Group's entire franchise network operated under 73 territories across 9 states, plus the Gary manufacturing plant, were not held by Legacy. They were held by Moreland Licensing Partners LLC, a holding entity I had incorporated, maintained, and renewed annually for 11 consecutive years. The paperwork showed everything current and properly maintained, which it was. What it did not show was who owned Moreland. The outside advisors Arabella had retained had not read past the first page. They had not asked whose entity was doing the maintaining. That specific question, the one nobody had thought to ask in 11 years, was the question that was going to determine what happened to Legacy's plant operations on Friday morning. By Thursday evening, Arabella's general counsel would have the injunction notice. By Friday, the question everyone would be asking was whether Legacy Heritage Group could legally operate at all. The answer was no. Corporate Vault is where these stories live, the ones where the outcome was already written before anyone else read the first line. My name is Dante Morrison. My official title at Legacy Heritage Group was Director of Brand Licensing and Trademark Operations. What that meant, I was the person who had built, maintained, and renewed every legal structure underlying Legacy's brand portfolio for 15 years. Every trade label, every territorial license, every franchise agreement that tied an operator in 9 states to the right to use Legacy's marks commercially. Harlan Thornton hired me when Legacy was operating 11 territories and a single manufacturing line. By the time his daughter called my documentation garbage, Legacy was running 73 territories, a full plant in Gary, and a heritage brand portfolio worth considerably more than the real estate the company owned. I had built that portfolio with the specific care of someone who understood what happens when valuable things are not properly structured. My father ran a regional printing company in Indianapolis, 31 employees at its height, 2 decades of relationships built on his name and his handshake. The clients who used Weston Print knew my father, not the company, my father. He never thought to build a structure that separated his relationships from the business. Then it mattered. He was 53 when his health required him to step back. His clients had spent 20 years doing business with a person, not a company. When that person became less available, the relationships did what unstructured relationships always do. They followed. By the time I finished my MBA, the company had been sold at a price that would have been insulting 5 years earlier. My father was philosophical about it. He had made a decision, he said, every day for 20 years to build around himself rather than beside himself. I was 26 when I watched that happen. Everything I built professionally after that had a legal architecture underneath it that could move independently of any company I worked for. Moreland Licensing Partners, LLC, was incorporated 9 years before Arabella Thornton walked into Legacy's Chicago headquarters. Harlan Thornton had 3 rules: know what you own, know what you owe, and never confuse the two. He had applied those rules to his company for 40 years. He simply had not applied them to his succession planning. The first time I understood what Arabella's arrival would eventually require, we were in Harlan's office reviewing the renewal calendar. "This renewal structure Moreland handles the master filing?" he asked. "Correct, has since the original registration." "Good firm." "Very good, Elias Wren. He's been on the account since day one." Harlan nodded. "Arabella is going to want to run a full portfolio review when she transitions in. I want you walking her through it." "Of course. She'll have questions about the structure. Be patient with her." What I noticed was the specific phrasing, when she transitions in, not when she joins. Harlan understood the difference between possession and transfer. He was leaving Arabella a company. He was not leaving her a map of it. The portfolio review happened 6 weeks after Arabella took the president title. She arrived 12 minutes late. "What's the overall picture?" Plain language. 73 active territories across 9 states. 4 exclusive manufacturing labels at Gary, all current, properly maintained. Renewal schedule is clean through next fiscal year. And the Moreland entity, that's a filing structure. Moreland holds the master licensing position on the exclusive labels. It's been the administrative structure since the original registrations. She wrote something, legacy-owned entity. A licensing holding structure. The relationship with Legacy is through the agreements Moreland administers. She looked up briefly, deciding whether the answer required a follow-up question. She decided it did not. "I want to run a full audit of the portfolio documentation next month. I want to understand what we actually own." "That's a smart place to start," I said. She had come close, closer than anyone at Legacy had come in 11 years. The question she needed to ask was not what Moreland administered, it was who owned Moreland. She moved on to her next item. I called Elias that evening. She asked about Moreland. How far did she go? Administrative structure. She stopped at the filing relationship. Did she ask about ownership? No. Do we adjust the timeline? Not yet, but we should assume she gets there eventually. What I had learned was that Arabella was not curious about what she didn't understand. She was interested in confirming what she already believed. That distinction was going to matter. 3 months later, Arabella called a brand strategy meeting and announced she was bringing all licensing administration in-house. She had a presentation, 4 slides, a diagram showing Legacy's brand portfolio mapped as an org structure with administrative functions flowing inward toward a new central entity. Legacy Brand Holdings, LLC. The plan is to migrate all trademark administration and licensing management into Legacy Brand Holdings by end of Q3. Walt Odom's team will manage the legal transition. What happens to existing third-party administrative relationships? I asked. They get absorbed or terminated. We'll evaluate case by case. The goal is a clean structure with no external dependencies. That makes sense, I said. I called Elias from the parking garage. She's moving licensing in-house. End of Q3. New entity called Legacy Brand Holdings. Walt Odom's team handles the migration. Walt Odom, he's good. He'll find the ownership question inside 60 days. That's my read too. So we're no longer theoretical. We are not. Then I need two things before next week. A complete inventory of every Moreland-administered label, the full underlying documentation, and a decision on whether the exit is accelerated or whether we use the migration process as cover. What does using it as cover look like? Moreland cooperates with the migration review, provides documentation, answers questions, never volunteers the ownership structure unless directly asked in writing, buys us 4 to 6 additional months. That works. I'll have the full inventory to you by Friday. One more thing. If we use the migration as cover, you cannot change your behavior at Legacy. Not 1 degree. Nothing has shifted, I said. Make sure it feels that way. The full inventory took me 3 evenings, 73 active territorial licenses, 4 exclusive manufacturing labels at the Gary plant, 11 heritage brand marks that Legacy's franchise operators had built their local reputations on for years. Every renewal current, every filing clean, every operator running their business under a legal structure whose controlling entity they had never thought to look at. I sent it to Elias Friday morning. The following Monday, I met with Harlan. The licensing migration, he said. Moreland, is that going to transfer cleanly? That's a question for the migration review. Walt's team will map the ownership chains. Whatever they find, they'll bring to Arabella. He was quiet. Dante, I don't know what Arabella is going to find when her team goes through the brand structure, but whatever she finds, the work you've done here has been exactly right. I appreciate that, Harlan. I mean it as an acknowledgement that I probably should have said more clearly along the way. It's a good company. It deserved to be built correctly. What Harlan had just told me was that he knew the migration was going to find something, and he was not going to intervene. That evening, I had dinner with Nora Fisk. The timeline is real now, I told her. Migration review starts next quarter. How long before her team finds the ownership question? 60 days once they start. Nora set her fork down. The 8 territories I mentioned, the operators are still interested, but they're going to want confirmation that the label structure holds independently of whatever happens between you and Legacy. Moreland holds the master licensing position on every label those operators run under. The licenses are clean, current, and held independently of Legacy's corporate structure. Whatever happens in the migration review, those labels do not transfer without Moreland's consent. Then let's talk about what an independent licensing practice actually looks like. We talked for 2 more hours. Walt Odom's first migration meeting happened on a Thursday morning in March. Conference room, 4th floor, 8 people around the table. Arabella had asked me to serve as the internal subject matter expert. You know this portfolio better than anyone. I need you embedded with Walt's team until the transfer is complete. Of course, I said. I'll give them everything they need. Odom was compact and methodical. He had a yellow legal pad and a mechanical pencil. Let's start with what we actually have, he said, looking at me. Walk me through the label architecture. I walked them through it. Everything organized, everything current, everything presented in the sequence most useful to a team beginning an administrative transfer. I answered every question they asked with complete accuracy. What I did not do was answer the questions they had not yet thought to ask. The Gary plant labels, Odom said. 4 exclusive manufacturing marks. These are the ones with the tightest operational dependency. Correct. The plant lines run under those 4 labels exclusively. Any interruption to the licensing structure affects production directly. He wrote something, priority item for the transfer. Agreed, those 4 should be the first thing your team maps fully. Odom looked up briefly, trying to determine if the urgency was technical or something else. He moved on. I drove to Columbus that Friday. Elias Wren's office was on the 14th floor near the Scioto Mile. The migration team started Thursday, I said. How far did they get on Moreland? Top of the structure, they flagged the Gary plant marks as a priority. When they go deeper, they find the registration origin. That points back to the original Moreland filing documents. That's when they ask about ownership. 6 to 10 weeks. Then we have a decision to make. He opened a folder, 2 documents. Option 1, Moreland formalizes its independent operating structure now, everything in place before Odom's team reaches the ownership question. And Option 2, we wait until they ask. The question becomes a negotiation rather than a revelation. Option 2 is cleaner legally. Option 1 gives you a functioning independent practice before Legacy understands what it's negotiating against. The first document was the restructured Moreland operating agreement. The second was the formal engagement letter between Moreland and Fisk brand partners, Nora's structure. Option 1, I said. I signed both. Elias walked me through the revised non-compete review. The Legacy Employment Agreement has a standard non-compete provision. 18 months, Chicago Metro, category restricted to Heritage Retail brand licensing. The provision applies to work performed in Legacy's category. It does not restrict Moreland from administering licenses Moreland already holds. Those licenses predate your employment. The Fisk territories are regional, not Chicago. Correct, outside the geographic restriction entirely. You're clean. But if Legacy's counsel argues that Moreland's existing licenses constitute a competitive arrangement you should have disclosed at hire, they have a theoretical argument. How strong? Weak, but they can argue it. It buys them time in front of a judge while the injunction is in process. How much time? 1 hearing, maybe 2, 60 days at most, during which Legacy's plant cannot legally operate under the marks. I nodded, that's already factored in. The Monday after Columbus, Arabella stopped me in the hallway. Quick update on the migration. Walt's team is moving faster than expected. I want to add a working session second week of April. I'll prepare a full contact inventory and relationship history for each territory operator. She started to leave, then turned back. A few of the longer tenured operators, do they have your personal cell? A few do, yes, historical relationship maintenance. After the transition meeting, I'd prefer all operator contact runs through the new internal team. For consistency, we want them feeling anchored to Legacy, not to individual personnel. Understood, I said. What Arabella had just told me was that she had concluded the operator relationships belonged to the company. She intended to anchor them to Legacy. The operators called my personal cell because of Moreland. Because when a franchise territory operator has a licensing question, they call the person who holds the license. Arabella was going to try to transfer a relationship built on a legal structure she didn't know she didn't own. That evening, I called Colt Reardon. Colt had been operating Legacy's Southern Indiana territory for 9 years. Quarterly check-in, he said. Renewals look clean. Everything's current. Your next cycle is October. A pause. I heard Legacy's doing some kind of internal restructure. Does that affect my renewal relationship? I want to know who I'm calling in October. The licensing structure that governs your territory is stable. Whoever administers it, the terms and the entity holding your license don't change without your direct consent as the operating party. So regardless of what Legacy restructures internally, my agreement is with whoever holds that license. That's correct. And that entity is Moreland. That's correct. Then I'll call Moreland in October, same as always. 9 of them had Colt's understanding of how their agreements actually worked. All 9 had my personal number. All 9 renewed through Moreland. Arabella was going to discover that in approximately 6 weeks. Accelerating the timeline meant 3 things. Moving the injunction pre-filing from a contingency document into an active instrument. confirming that all 9 territorial operators whose renewal relationships ran through Moreland understood where their agreements actually lived, and establishing a fixed departure date, not approximate, a specific date on a calendar known only to me and Elias. I called Elias the morning after my conversation with Colt. She's going to try to route operator contact through an internal team. She wants them anchored to legacy personnel. She doesn't know the operators call Moreland directly. She thinks they call me because I'm their legacy contact. She's going to install a new team and expect them to take the calls. And the operators will call Moreland. 9 of them will. That's the confirmation event. So we set the date. We settled on the second Friday of May, 11 weeks out, long enough to complete the final steps cleanly, short enough that Odom's review wouldn't reach the ownership question before I was out. What do you need from me between now and then? The injunction pre-filing complete by end of April. Moreland's operating accounts fully separated from any legacy banking relationship, and a clean paper trail showing that Moreland's licensing position was established independently of your employment. I'll send everything by end of next week. After May, there's no version of this that doesn't become contentious before it resolves. You understand that? I do. Make sure the 11 weeks look exactly like the 11 months before them. The near discovery happened on a Wednesday in the 3rd week of April. Odom's team had been working through the Gary plant label documentation for 6 days. One of his associates, a second year named Forrest Kell, precise and quietly relentless, looked up from the Moreland registration documents. The Moreland Operating Agreement. I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. The licensing authority flows from Moreland to Legacy's operational entities, not from Legacy to Moreland. That's correct, I said. So Legacy is the licensee, Moreland is the licensor. Correct. He looked at the document again. Who are Moreland's principals? The room had 4 people in it. Odom was at the far end of the table. Kell was looking at me with attentive patience. That information is in the Moreland corporate registration, Delaware filing. It's a matter of public record. The entity number is on the cover page of the operating agreement. Kell looked at the cover page. He wrote the entity number on his pad. I'll pull it this afternoon, he said. Good, make sure it goes in the full file. Walt will want the complete ownership chain documented. Odom looked up briefly at the word ownership, then returned to his papers. What Kell would find when he pulled the Delaware corporate record was accurate, current, and completely unremarkable. The standard registration of a small holding LLC with a listed managing member. The managing member's name was there. It had always been there. What it would not tell him immediately was the full significance of what that name meant for Legacy's ability to operate. 3 days later, Arabella called me into her office. The operator transition is moving faster than I expected. Walt's team thinks we can have franchise relationship management fully transitioned by end of May. That's an aggressive timeline, I said. I've made a hire, Petra Weil. She starts first week of May. I want her in front of the operators before the summer renewal cycle. That's a tight ramp for someone walking in cold. That's why I want you to spend her first 2 weeks walking her through every operator. The history, the personalities, everything that lives in your head. I'll give her everything I can. I want to be straight with you, Dante. This migration has shown me how much institutional knowledge this company carries in individuals rather than systems. That's something I'm correcting. You've been exactly what Legacy needed for 15 years. What I'm building now is a company that doesn't need any one person to function. That's a worthy goal, I said. That conversation was not the moment I decided to leave. That decision had been made 18 months earlier, when Arabella had described Legacy's brand portfolio as underleveraged and overcomplicated. What the conversation about Petra Weil was, confirmation. Arabella was hiring someone to take over my operator relationships on May 4th. My departure was scheduled for May 9th. She was going to spend 5 days introducing a new licensing director to 9 franchise operators who called Moreland directly, under the impression that Legacy owned the licenses. I sent Elias one message that evening, May 9th, non-negotiable. He replied in 4 minutes. Understood. Injunction pre-filing complete by April 30th. We're ready. I visited Harlan on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. He was standing at the window when I knocked. "Close the door," he said. "I wanted to check in before things get busy with the transition." "Things are already busy. Walt's team is 2 weeks from finishing the first phase." A pause. "When they finish mapping the Gary labels, when they get to the full ownership documentation, what are they going to find?" The room was quiet. "They're going to find a complete and accurate licensing structure," I said. "Everything properly documented, currently maintained, legally sound." He looked up. "That's not what I asked." "No, it isn't." He nodded. "How long have you been thinking about leaving?" "A while. Before Arabella came in." "Yes." "I see." He folded his hands. "I'm not going to ask for details I have no right to ask for. What you've built outside this company is yours. I understood that when I hired you." A pause. "I've been watching Arabella operate for 18 months, and the gap between what she thinks she owns and what she actually owns gets wider every quarter. I should have mapped that gap myself. It's a good company. It deserved to be built correctly." "Was it?" "Every structure I put in place was legally sound, properly maintained, and built to serve the company's operational needs. For 15 years it did exactly that." "And after you leave?" "The structures will still be there. The question is how Legacy engages with them." He stood and extended his hand. "Take care of yourself, Dante." "You as well, Harlan." "One thing," he said as I reached the door. I turned. "When this resolves, don't make it ugly. The company may have earned ugly. The operators didn't." Petra Weil arrived on a Monday morning in the first week of May. She was thorough, efficient, and came in with a notebook already half full of questions. "Walk me through the operator relationships, not the file version, the real version." I spent 2 days walking her through it. The territory histories, the operator personalities, the renewal rhythms. I gave her the real version, complete, accurate, and organized. What I gave her was true in every particular. What I did not give her was the one piece of information that would have changed what she did with it. "Colt Reardon, Southern Indiana," Petra said, reading from her notes. 9-year operator calls quarterly, renewal in October. What's his primary concern? License continuity. Colt runs a tight operation. His primary concern is that nothing structural changes without his direct knowledge. She wrote it down. "I'll make sure his first call with me addresses that directly." Colt called Legacy's main number on a Wednesday, 3 days before my departure. He had seen the internal migration announcement and wanted to know who would be handling his October renewal. The internal team routed him to a coordinator who told Colt that Legacy Brand Holdings would be managing all franchise licensing going forward. Colt called my personal cell 4 minutes later. "I just got off the phone with someone on the new team. They told me Legacy Brand Holdings is handling my October renewal. I heard there was a communication this week. I've been renewing through Moreland for 9 years. Who is Legacy Brand Holdings?" I chose my next sentence carefully. "Your licensing agreement is with Moreland Licensing Partners. That agreement governs your October renewal. Whatever internal administrative structure Legacy is building doesn't change the entity your agreement runs through." "So I still call Moreland?" "Your agreement is with Moreland, same as it always has." "Okay, that's what I needed to know." Colt, log the call on your end, the date and what was discussed for your own records. "Already doing it," he said. The call was logged in the CRM system. Arabella saw it. She called me into her office the following morning. She had the activity report on her desk. "Colt Reardon, he called the main line Wednesday. The internal team handled the call. Then there's an outbound call from your records to his cell. He had a question about his October renewal structure. The internal team gave him information about Legacy Brand Holdings. He called me to clarify." "And what did you clarify?" "That his licensing agreement governs his renewal process. Factual information." She looked at me with a quality of attention she had not directed at me before. "I asked you to route operator contact through the new team." He called my personal cell after the internal team's response confused him. I answered a factual question about his existing agreement. I logged the contact. Going forward, I understand it won't happen again. She held the look for 3 seconds. Walt's team is finishing the Gary plant documentation this week. I want you available for their final session Friday morning. I'll be there, I said. I sat in my office on Thursday evening after everyone else had left. The desk had been cleared over 3 days in increments small enough to be invisible. The bag in my car had been updated. My personal server held everything it needed to hold. The Moreland accounts had been fully separated from any legacy banking relationship. There was nothing left in that office that belonged to me except the chair I was sitting in. I checked one thing, the Delaware Corporate Registry for Moreland Licensing Partners, LLC. The managing member's name was there, as it had always been, one search away. Forrest Kell had not filed a follow-up query since he pulled it 3 weeks ago. He was still working through it. Thursday night was not the night. I turned off the office light and walked out of the Legacy Heritage Group building for the second to last time. Tuesday afternoon, Forrest Kell ran a second query on the Moreland, Delaware corporate record. I was in the 4th floor conference room when it happened. I felt the particular quality of Kell's attention shift when someone has found something and is deciding what to do with it. He looked up once toward the end of the session, not at me, at a point on the table 2 feet to my left. Then he wrote something on his pad and turned back to the file. At 7:15 that evening, Elias called. Kell ran a second registry query on Moreland this afternoon, 4:17 p.m. I know. How do you know? I saw him find something. He didn't ask about it. He queried the registered agent's affiliated filing history. That search pulls every entity the same agent has filed for in the past 20 years. One of those entities is your personal holding LLC. I let that land. That's the connection. He now has your name attached to a Moreland-affiliated filing. He hasn't linked it to your employment record yet, but he's 1 step away. How long? If he works through it tonight, Odom has it by morning. If he saves it for the Friday session, we have until Friday. We can't plan around until Friday. No, we can't. The injunction pre-filing is complete. I can file at any point after your separation is confirmed. If she moves tomorrow, we file tomorrow. Then we're ready. There is one adjustment if she moves early. The Friday session was going to give us something. With you in the room when Kell presented the ownership chain, you controlled the first framing. Without you in the room, Odom's team frames it for Arabella directly. Then I'll write it another way. A communication to Harlan. Factual record of the Moreland structure, the licensing history, sent before I'm out of the building. He's still chairman. He can put it in front of the board before Odom's team completes their presentation. A long pause. That's cleaner than the session would have been. I'll have it drafted tonight. I drafted it in 3 hours, 12 pages. The full history of Moreland Licensing Partners. When it was incorporated, how the licensing structure was established, how the administrative relationship with Legacy had operated across 15 years. No advocacy, a factual record. I sent it to Elias at 10:47. He replied at 11:20. Clean, no edits. I'll hold it until you give me the word. I knew before I walked into the building. The 3 couriers were visible from the elevator bank. They were there before I arrived. The decision had been made the night before. Kell had connected the chain. I opened my computer, checked 2 email threads, then printed 1 page from the corporate licensing register. The summary page showing every active label and the entity holding each one. Moreland Licensing Partners, LLC, listed as licensor against 73 territorial licenses and 4 Gary plant manufacturing marks. I folded the page and put it in my jacket pocket. When Arabella's assistant knocked, I was ready. Back in my office, I did 4 things. I forwarded the licensed register summary to my personal server, time-stamped. I cleared my personal files into the bag from my car. I sent Elias, she moved this morning, file the injunction notice Thursday. And I sent the 12-page Moreland history to Harlan Thornton's personal email. For your records and for the boards, everything here is accurate. Then I called Elias. She moved. I saw the message. The Friday session with Odom's team. They'll present to her directly now. The communication to Harlan covers that. The injunction notice files Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Legacy's general counsel will have it before Arabella's first meeting. A pause, you're out. I'm out. Go home, I'll call you. At 3 p.m., Elias called. Two things. First, Harlan read the communication. He forwarded it to the board's independent counsel this afternoon. This should be read before the migration presentation. That's what I needed. Second, Odom's team finished the Gary plant documentation this morning before the termination meeting. Kell's ownership chain findings are in the final migration report. Arabella has the report. She had it when she called you in. I absorbed that. She knew what Moreland was when she fired me. She knew who owned Moreland. Whether she understood what that meant, that's a different question. What does her outside counsel think it means? Unknown, but they advised her to move immediately rather than wait for Friday's presentation. She took it because she thought removing you from the building gave Legacy control of the narrative. What it actually did was confirm the separation that triggers the injunction. Her outside counsel gave her the right tactical advice for the wrong understanding of the situation. Thursday, 9 a.m., I said. 9 a.m. Thursday arrived with the ordinary texture of a morning. Coffee, traffic, gray sky. At 9 a.m., Elias filed. Legacy Heritage Group's general counsel was a careful man named Aldous Price who read the injunction notice twice before picking up the phone. He sat with it for 4 minutes before calling Arabella. His opening sentence, "We have a structural problem that requires your immediate attention before any operator contact happens today." Arabella was in a 9:30 meeting with Petra Weil when the call came through. I was at my kitchen table when Nora Fisk called at 10:40. The notice landed. I know. 2 of the Indiana operators have already called Moreland's registered line. They're asking for confirmation that their October renewals are unaffected. What did the line say? That Moreland Licensing Partners is aware of Legacy's internal restructuring and will be reaching out to all operators under active agreements within the week to confirm renewal parameters. A pause. I drafted the language last night. Send me the full operator communication before it goes out. Already in your inbox. Walt Odom called Legacy's general counsel at 11:15. Aldous Price sent me a brief message at 11:42. Walt's team has suspended the migration review pending legal assessment. I want you to know that the board has the document you sent Harlan. It was enough. Petra Weil called my personal cell at 12:30. She was careful, professionally careful. I've been asked not to continue the operator onboarding process until further notice. I want to understand the operator relationships I've been briefed on, whether the picture I have is complete. The picture you have is accurate. Whether it's complete is a question your general counsel is in a better position to answer right now. A pause. The operators whose relationships I've been building, their licensing agreements. They don't run through Legacy Brand Holdings. It was not a question. Moreland Licensing Partners holds the master licensing position on the active territorial agreements. That's been the structure since the original registrations. And Moreland is yours. Moreland is an independent licensing entity, yes. I walked into this role 5 days ago. I've spent 2 days building relationship maps for agreements I apparently have no authority over. That's an accurate description of what happened. Whose fault is that? I took my time. The migration review would have surfaced the ownership structure on Friday, the timeline compressed. You didn't have the full picture before it became relevant. What happens to the operators now? Moreland will reach out to every operator under active agreement this week. Renewal parameters are unchanged. The licensing structure is stable. A pause. If Legacy resolves this, what does the operator relationship look like? That depends on what Legacy and Moreland agree on. Those conversations haven't started yet. Arabella's outside counsel contacted Elias at 2 p.m. They want an emergency meeting, Elias said. Tomorrow, in person. What's their framing? Unauthorized competitive arrangement developed during the employment relationship, leading with the bad faith argument. We expected that. I've already sent them the pre-employment documentation package, the original Moreland Incorporation date, the capital account history. Everything predating your legacy start date by 2+ years. Their counsel went quiet for 40 minutes after receiving it. What's the real ask? Continuity. They need the plant running. The Gary labels are the critical path. 4 manufacturing marks, plant lines can't operate without them. They're looking at a Friday production stoppage. A pause. The plant employs 211 people in Gary. I know. I want to make sure that number is in the room tomorrow. It's been in the room for 18 months. That's why the licensing terms I'm prepared to offer are fair. Not punitive, fair. What are we offering? A transitional licensing agreement, standard commercial terms, market rate fees, 5-year term with renewal options. Legacy operates the plant under Moreland's licenses. The franchise territories continue as they are. The operators experience no disruption, and Legacy Brand Holdings gets restructured to reflect what it actually controls. They'll push back on the dissolution. They can call it a restructure. The outcome is the same. Elias was quiet. That's a better offer than they deserve. It's the right offer. Harlan built that plant. The 211 people in Gary didn't make Arabella's decisions. The terms reflect that. The meeting was in Odom's firm's conference room, neutral ground. Arabella arrived with outside counsel and a financial advisor. Elias and I arrived 3 minutes early. Arabella looked at me across the table for one moment. Not with hostility, with the specific attention of someone recalibrating something fundamental. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Outside counsel made the bad faith argument. Elias dismantled it with the pre-employment documentation in 11 minutes. After that, the conversation was about terms. Arabella said 4 words directly to me across the entire session. In the second hour, during a break when the attorneys had stepped out. Why didn't you tell me? Not accusatory, genuinely asking. You asked about Moreland in January. You asked if it was a filing structure. I told you it was a licensing holding structure. The relationship with Legacy runs through the agreements Moreland administers. That's not an answer. It's the answer I gave you. The question underneath it, who owns Moreland, wasn't one you asked. She was quiet. I should have asked. Yes, you should have. Would you have told me? I thought about that honestly. If you had asked directly, in writing, as part of a formal licensing audit, I would have answered accurately and completely. What I would not have done is volunteer information to a person who had already decided what she thought the answer was. You came into the January review looking to confirm what you believed. I gave you accurate answers to the questions you asked. What happened in the gap between those 2 things is the story of how we got here. She held the sentence. That's honest. It's the only thing I've given you that hasn't been. Everything else was accurate. The attorneys came back. The session resumed. The transitional licensing agreement was executed 17 days later. Legacy Heritage Group retained operational rights to all 73 territorial licenses and the 4 Gary plant manufacturing marks under a 5-year commercial agreement with Moreland licensing partners. Market rate. Clean terms, the plant ran its Friday lines without interruption. Legacy Brand Holdings was restructured into a franchise relationship management entity. Petra Weil ran it. I incorporated Moreland's full commercial practice in June. My father used to say that he had made a decision every day for 20 years to build around himself rather than beside himself. He didn't understand it was a decision until it was too late. I was 26 when I watched that happen. What I built over 18 months and 11 years was not revenge. It was a structure, the kind my father had not built, the kind Harlan Thornton had built a company on and then failed to map. The difference between a person who gets caught when a situation changes and a person who doesn't is whether they built something beside themselves before they needed to. The most irreversible professional mistake is not a bad decision made quickly under pressure. It is the good decision deferred for so long that by the time the pressure arrives, the time to make it has already passed. If something in this story landed where it was meant to land, subscribe to Corporate Vault. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, one story at a time.